of the dialogue, it's my pleasure to open plenary session 1, Current Landscape of Recovery Readiness. The session will provide a comprehensive understanding of where we stand today in recovery readiness. Our panelists will identify critical gaps, challenges, and opportunities in the recovery landscape while highlighting successful approaches that can inform our path forward. I'd like to welcome our esteemed panelists for this session to the stage. Dr. Kutsuya Fuda, Head of Disaster Risk Management and Resilience at the World Health Organization, will moderate the session. Mr. Mohammed Nazmul Abedin, Joint Secretary, the Ministry of Disaster Management and Relief, Bangladesh. Mr. Gabriel Belém Monteiro, Vice President, National Institute for Disaster Risk Management and Reduction, in Mozambique, excuse me. Mr. Nishikawa Satoru, Professor, Senior Advisor for the Japan International Cooperation Agency. Mr. Jason Francis, Disaster Recovery Specialist for the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency. And Mr. Yevgeny Zhukov, Director General for Climate Change and Sustainable Development with the Asian Development Bank. Dr. Huda, you can please go ahead when you're ready.
Distinguished audience, a very warm welcome to the first plenary session of this high-level policy dialogue on recovery readiness. Today, as Paul just mentioned, we have 5 distinguished speakers with us. But before that, I would like to really thank our partners who relentlessly support this session to put together. Asian Development Bank, Global Network of Civil Society Organizations for Disaster Reduction, United Nations Development Program, United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction. I wouldn't start without mentioning Sandra and Paul for their support to put all of us, 7 of us together today. So you have already heard about the names of our speakers, so I will give some more introduction as we call upon them. But before that, I think that it's always a good idea to set the ground rule. So ground rule here is each speaker, you will get 5 minutes for your intervention. I will ask a question specifically to your context. And then after that, be very mindful that there will be somebody showing the time and giving you some heads up that when you are approaching to 4 minutes. So, and then after that last 1 minute, that would allow you to wrap up, you will get the final indication that your time is up. But as a moderator, I will also intervene. So this is how the whole session will be there. And then at the end of this 5 intervention, we will have open discussion. Floor will be open for questions. We will invite the questions from the audience, and then our speakers will answer those questions. However, at the end, you will have, again, an opportunity to share the key message that you would like everyone in this room to take home. So that will be an opportunity at the end. So now let me introduce you to the session. So first of all, thank you for joining this plenary on recovery readiness. This theme is a growing one, growing urgency as disasters become more frequent, complex, and costly. Recovery readiness defines whether societies simply rebuild that was lost or seize the opportunity to build back stronger, safer, and more inclusive. You have heard all these words in the very beginning of this session at the opening. The midterm review of the Sendai Framework in 2023 gave us a sobering message. Progress is uneven. While disaster mortality has been reduced in some regions, economic losses continue to rise, reaching over 140 billion annually in direct damages worldwide. Financing for recovery remains a persistent bottleneck. The World Resilient Recovery Conference in June 2025 reaffirmed that the recovery is not just about restoration, but about transformation. With over 4,000 participants from 130 countries, the conference endorsed the 10 priority actions for recovery, one resilient future, while underlining one striking fact that less than 20% of recovery and reconstruction costs are secured in advance, leaving most recovery efforts underfunded and delayed. But behind the global picture, regional realities remind us of both the challenges and opportunities, and it is very important to get to that regional realities. In the Asia-Pacific, the most disaster-prone region accounted for nearly half of global disaster events in 2022. Yet it is also pioneering anticipatory recovery financing and resilient infrastructure systems. And you will hear about this more in the session. Africa, facing compounding shocks of climate conflict and food insecurity, has seen climate-related disasters triple since the 1980s, but is leading with the community-driven and nature-based recovery solutions. Let's come to the Latin America. Latin America and the Caribbean, where disasters caused over $2 billion in average annual losses in the past decade, are demonstrating how spatial protection systems can accelerate equitable recovery. This spatial protection system is actually the social protection. Europe and Central Asia are grappling with the recovery implications of cascading risk from floods to conflict, but are also advancing cross-border recovery cooperation and risk governance. So with that in mind, for this session today, we will be focusing on three distinct issues. One, we will be taking the stock of the current state of recovery readiness, grounded in these findings. Secondly, we will identify the gaps, challenges, and opportunities across both the domestic and international recovery landscapes. Last but not the least, which is more, I would say that inspirational, is the successful case studies that can inspire and inform actionable strategies. The message is very clear. Recovery readiness is not only about preparing for the next disaster, but about ensuring recovery becomes a driver of resilience, sustainability, and equity everywhere. So with that, let us then now set the stage for a dialogue that can help chart a stronger, more resilient recovery future for all in the regions across the world. So I'm now turning to my first speaker today from Bangladesh, Mr. Mohammad Nazmul Abedin, who is the Joint Secretary and Head of Refugee Cell, and also Director of Cyclone Preparedness Program in the Ministry of Disaster Management and Relief. So, Mr. Abedin, for you, we would like to hear, giving the reference of Bangladesh, the country has been a pioneer in integrating disaster risk reduction into national development and climate policies. What lessons from Bangladesh's recovery from recurrent floods and cyclones can be shared as examples of building back better? Over to you, Mr. Abedin.
Thank you. It is really an honor to represent Bangladesh and to represent Ministry of Disaster Management at this dialogue on resilient recovery. As you know that Bangladesh is highly exposed to floods, cyclones, river erosion, and now the growing impact of climate change. It has had to evolve a comprehensive approach of disaster recovery, one that is risk-informed, inclusive, and forward-looking. And today, I will share how Bangladesh, through the leadership of our ministry, is building a strong national recovery governance system and what lessons we can offer from our experiences. I will mainly focus on 3 points. One is institutionalizing recovery governance in our policy and practice, and then recovery in action, our ministry-led programs for post-disaster, and how risk-informed governance and decision-making works in our country. In institutionalizing recovery governance in policy and practice, we have focused on embedding recovery within our national systems not treating it as a temporary response. And for example, we have SOD, which is Standing Order on Disaster, which we coordinate, define clear mandate for recovery across ministries, local governments, and communities, ensuring a whole of government recovery system. Another example is our ministry is currently leading the development of National Disaster Recovery Framework, which is underway, a policy blueprint to ensure recovery is timely, inclusive, and aligned with development and climate goals. We also have our National Plan for Disaster Management, which includes dedicated recovery objectives with emphasis on building back better, especially in housing, infrastructure, and livelihoods. My second point is recovery in action. We'll highlight on some programs led by Minister of Disaster Management Relief, like after Cyclone Amphan and Cyclone Sitrang in 2022, Minister of Disaster Management and Relief has led implementation of comprehensive recovery packages, which includes rebuilding homes, restoring embankments, providing cash support, and reestablishing livelihoods, especially for vulnerable groups like women-headed households and small farmers. We also have programs like Gracious Relief, cash transfer, and food assistance. And we have some projects like under Emergency Cyclone Recovery and Resilience Project, supported by World Bank and other partners. We have built multi-purpose cyclone shelters, restoring rural roads, and promoting resilient housing solutions in coastal districts. And we also have some projects like Urban Resilience Project, targeting urban vulnerability in earthquakes and floods. And the next question is how we take decision. Our decision taking is risk-informed governance. Ministry of Disaster Management and Relief leads efforts to ensure that all recovery planning is informed by risk data and vulnerability assessment. We are scaling up the use of digital data system, and we have collaboration with Bangladesh Bureau of Statistics. And our planning is closely tied with early warning system. Ministry of Disaster Management works with Bangladesh Meteorological Department and regional partners to ensure that early warning lead to early actions, especially for cash and shelter readiness. And this data-driven approach ensures that our recovery is anticipatory, not just reactive. These three examples we can focus here.
Thank you very much. I would like to, though, ask you one more question, that how do you see the partnership around the whole process that you just described in Bangladesh, particularly in installing the risk-informed governance, which is very interesting, from evidence generation to the decision-making?
Yes. Partnership is, of course, crucial for a country like Bangladesh because we have greatly benefited from partnership, both technical and financial, to strengthen our recovery system. Like Ministry of Disaster Management has worked with UNDP, World Bank, ADB, IFRC, and others to build capacity for post-disaster need assessment. We also engaged with regional mechanisms such as SARC in South Asia and global platforms like CTRI to exchange knowledge in resilient recovery. And also our collaboration with the Green Climate Fund and Adaptation Fund supports our climate resilient programs.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Abedin, for your very descriptive and eloquent intervention to this session. So, ladies and gentlemen, now I would like to turn to our next speaker. Next speaker, I would like to invite Mr. Gabriel Belém Monteiro, Vice President, National Institute for Disaster Risk Management and Reduction, INGD, Mozambique, to present Mozambique's experience. Before I ask the question to him, our distinguished speaker will speak in Portuguese. So I would like to request all of you to tune in your English, those who do not speak Portuguese. So, Mr. Monteiro, My question to you is, Mozambique has been facing repeated large-scale cyclones in recent years, such as Idai and Freddy. What systemic challenges did you encounter in mobilizing resources and institutional capacities for recovery? I understand that a colleague is also present here with Mr. Monteiro. So Mr. Alberto Armando, you will be taking the questions, I understand. Okay, but if there's something that you feel like intervening, so please do so after the speaker. Thank you. Over to you.
Muito obrigado. Boa tarde. Boa tarde, excelências. Moçambique tem registrado nas últimas décadas um aumento significativo da frequência e da intensidade dos ciclones tropicais. Na década de 80, tivemos 3 ciclones. Na década de 90, 6 ciclones. Na década de 2000, 4 ciclones. Na década de 2010, 6 ciclones. Na década de 2020, já tivemos 12 ciclones. Estes números demonstram de forma clara como as alterações climáticas estão a intensificar fenômenos extremos no nosso país. Na época chuvosa e ciclônica 2024-2025, Moçambique foi atingido pelos ciclones Chido, Dikeled e Jude, que impactaram severamente as províncias do norte, uma região já fragilizada pela pressão humanitária resultante dos deslocados internos devido ao conflito. Ao mesmo tempo, as regiões centro e sul enfrentaram secas prolongadas. Cada um destes fenômenos deixou consequências profundas nas comunidades, nas infraestruturas e na economia. Permitam-me destacar 3 desafios sistêmicos que continuamos a enfrentar na mobilização de recursos e capacidades institucionais para a recuperação. Primeiro, recuperação interrompida pela recorrência de choques. A frequência dos desastres faz com que muitas vezes a recuperação seja interrompida antes de estar concluída. Exemplo, no princípio deste ano, foram entregues ao distrito do Bus, Nhamatanda, na província de Sofala, infraestruturas de habitação e escolas construídas no âmbito da recuperação do ciclone Idai, de há 6 anos. Antes de consolidar uma crise, o país é forçado a regressar ao modo de emergência. Financiamento desproporcional, segundo ponto. A maior parte dos recursos é canalizada para a resposta imediata, enquanto o financiamento de médio e longo prazo para a recuperação é muito limitado. Este vazio entre a emergência e a reconstrução compromete a resiliência. A crise global de financiamento humanitário. As múltiplas pressões sobre os doadores reduziram a previsibilidade e a escala do apoio, afetando particularmente países na linha da frente da crise climática, como é o caso de Moçambique. Após o ciclone Idai, estes desafios tornaram-se ainda mais evidentes. Lentidão na disponibilização dos fundos, a ausência de mecanismos flexíveis que permitissem investir logo na fase de emergência, a escala avassaladora das necessidades, sobretudo em infraestruturas essenciais. Mensagens-chave de Moçambique. Da experiência do país, 3 mensagens merecem ser sublinhadas neste diálogo. Primeiro, financiamento rápido e flexível é essencial para ligar a resposta e a recuperação e permitir reconstruir melhor. Segunda, recuperação como prioridade urgente deve ser entendida como parte da resiliência e não como um esforço secundário. Terceiro, apoio sustentado. Os países repetidamente atingidos por desastres climáticos necessitam de mecanismos estáveis e previsíveis para quebrar o ciclo de vulnerabilidade e independência. A recuperação não é apenas reconstruir o que se perdeu, mas sim é proteger vidas, dignidade e os ganhos de desenvolvimento. Oportunidades e avanços recentes. Moçambique tem vindo a criar condições para uma recuperação mais resiliente, entre os quais há um compromisso político ao mais alto nível, com ênfase na perspectiva do governo em curso, com vista à potenciação e autonomização dos distritos para prevenção e resposta a desastres. Decisão do Conselho de Ministros para elaborar a Estratégia Nacional de Gestão de Desastres, sendo uma oportunidade para incorporar a abordagem Build Back Better e também a integração da abordagem de reassentamento preventivo, que inclui o mapeamento de zonas de risco, escolha de áreas seguras, consulta comunitária, planos técnicos, mobilização de recursos, construção de infraestruturas e transferência assistida e monitorização. Réplica de infraestruturas resilientes com boas práticas. Integração das ações de reconstrução e recuperação do Fundo de Gestão de Calamidades. Uso sistemático da ferramenta como a avaliação de necessidades pós-desastres e a avaliação de danos em habitação e edifícios para apuramento de custos de reconstrução e recuperação. Implementação do Plano Nacional de Proteção Financeira contra Desastres, existência de uma política e estratégia de gestão de deslocados internos com um plano de ação que inclui a reconstrução e recuperação. Alinhamento dos projetos nacionais com as prioridades de reconstrução resiliente. E muito obrigado.
Thank you very, very much, Mr. Montero. That was quite elaborate and also very clear, a strategic approach that you have taken in Mozambique to face the cyclones and then also to recover from. So I would like to also ask you one small perspective of this, that how that whole thing, like, you know, I see that there are a lot of community level activities, assessment you have conducted. How did you manage the financing? Did you face any bigger, like, you know, some sort of challenges in managing financing, or how this is going to help you to allocate the resources? When we talk about financing, we always think that resource mobilization, but allocation resources is something that money is available in the community. So how does that help? Like, you know, how did that help you in these circumstances?
Muito obrigado. Em Moçambique, o governo, por notar que o sistema de desastres é frequente, criou um fundo de gestão de desastres, que é um fundo que o governo retira do seu orçamento. Em paralelo, o governo tem uma forte ligação com os parceiros, com os quais planifica anualmente as necessidades para assistência às comunidades no quadro da época chuvosa ou mesmo no quadro de ciclones ou cheias.
So, the government, due to the recurrence of the disaster, the government decided to create the Disaster Management Fund that support the initiative on humanitarian assistance, including part of the recovery process. But also, the government is also linked to the donors or partners that we engage to this reconstruction process in developing some of useful information that we apply in this context.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Montero and also Mr. Alberto, for your intervention. So, and also we clearly get a picture that despite the lot of challenges, how Mozambique is still continuing in building back better and looking forward to such recovery and then towards resilience. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Also.
Thank you.
So I would like to now turn to Professor Nishikawa Satoru. He's a professor and senior advisor of Japan International Cooperation Agency. Sitting in Japan and knowing, whole world knows about Japan, how they are managing the disasters, and then how they are using the innovative approaches in managing disaster, not only response and preparedness, but also in recovery. So it will be very good to know from Professor Satoru some of your experience in Japan around this, around this international recovery platform, G20 and Sendai Framework, because Japan has been central to advance recovery readiness globally. So from your perspective, how have global recovery practices shifted since 2005?
Thank you for your question, and it's my great honor to be here today. And I recall that right after the Second World Conference on Disaster Reduction in January 2005, I initiated the process to create this international recovery platform. And the creation of the IRP in 2005 enabled organized referencing and repository of disaster recovery and reconstruction experiences. And also, this was the good opportunity to expand the scope of disaster reduction to include employment and income generation. And this was quite important. Right after a disaster, the humanitarian aid comes in. But when the emergency phase fades out, then comes the real difficulty. How to revive the local economy, how to ensure the employment, how can the affected region really stand up from the ashes. And the creation of IRP was a good opportunity to include UN specialized agencies like ILO or FAO, which are not the traditional players in response. And also the World Bank and other international financing institutions were attracted to this issue of better recovery. Recovery and reconstruction, in reality, is a painful process. When the immediate response phase changes to the recovery phase, the responsible officer in the affected area, he or she faces numerous difficulties and criticism. They are usually machine-gunned with difficult questions from everybody. The IRP is expected to be the lighthouse to guide them in this painful process. And since then, IRP has really served as the reference point for various experiences. Previous to the creation of IRP, it was only the scattered case studies. Now we can look up to IRP as the repository. Now, by having such mechanisms, the global community can better share the various difficult experiences. So I'll stop here first. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I know there are a lot to hear from you, from Japan. However, I'll be very specific to learn something from you. I think it will be very good for all our audience to also know how Japan used, like you said, painful process. So we understand that process could be actually very painful. So how Japan engaged the population You referred in the morning discussion, you referred to one of the mechanism how things are, let's say, it has been created as a shared responsibility with the population. So would you like to highlight on that how population were part of generating the financing and then one of the government approach that make the process really painful sometimes?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the question. Well, I would like to first emphasize the importance of archiving the records of past disasters. And this is quite important because most of the local leaders, specifically municipal mayors, they would never think about recovery readiness unless they recognize the risk. And the only way to convince the local leaders or the municipal mayors is to show to them that in the past history, their area or their neighboring areas have been actually affected by disasters. Then they would start to listen to the necessity of recovery readiness. And that's one. The second practice in Japan is to have a pre-disaster damage assessment for major disasters. Japan is foreseeing a possibility of a huge earthquake hitting Tokyo, or a huge ocean tectonic earthquake affecting the major areas of the Nankai Trough. Also, we might experience a volcanic eruption of Mount Fuji. And since these risks are already identified, the government has done pre-disaster damage assessment, and the results are published and open to the public. Now, that generates awareness of the possibilities. On the other hand, if there is a big disaster in Japan, the public at large accept to share the solidarity, to share some of the increased taxes to be allocated to the affected area. And this has been possible because all the Japanese recognize that disasters are not somebody else's business. Everybody recognizes that there is a possibility that those things may happen to them. So anyway, I would really like to emphasize the importance of archiving past disasters, and also with modern science, making due risk assessments and damage estimation beforehand, and make it public, and use it for public awareness. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor Satoru. That's a very important message, that keeping the record and learning from the past, because our present is always based on past. Thank you very much. So I turn to my right side now. So now my speaker is, I would like to invite Mr. Jason Francis. And Mr. Jason Francis is the disaster recovery specialist in Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency. My question to you will be a very specific one. The Caribbean has extensive experience with regional risk pooling and coordinated recovery mechanisms. What are the most critical institutional or financing innovations still needed to ensure faster, more inclusive recovery in the Caribbean context? Maybe the rest of the world can also learn from that.
Sure, thank you, and good afternoon. Firstly, let me bring you greetings from sunny Barbados. It is a pleasure to be here. Let me also recognize Ms. Elizabeth Riley, our Executive Director, who very recently joined us in the audience, and she's been a pillar of strength in disaster risk management in the region. I commit to answering any questions, but if they're much harder, I can pass them over to my Executive Director. As you know, the Caribbean is one of the most hazard-prone regions in the world. And we face threats from hurricanes, earthquakes, storm surge, volcanic eruption. And compounding that is our smallness of size and in terms of land mass and also our small open economies. But the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency has been playing a critical role in terms of our recovery in the region. An analysis of the results of comprehensive disaster management audits over the years has shown that Caribbean states have scored the lowest in the area of recovery. And for this reason, SEDIMA has made this a priority, resilient recovery a priority, as part of its strategic objective 3 in the SEDIMA Strategic Plan 2022 to 2027. And this is being done through the Caribbean Resilient Recovery Facility. I will speak to a few of the institutional and financing innovations needed to ensure a faster and more inclusive recovery in the region. First, we want to speak about the national recovery frameworks. SEDIMA has developed a model national recovery framework for participating states. And this recovery framework promotes stronger governance and enhanced disaster recovery resilience across the Caribbean. The updated framework also focuses on gender responsiveness and greater attention to the inclusion of vulnerable groups, gender equality, human rights-based approaches to disaster reduction. In addition to that, it is important to adopt appropriate recovery models, especially for the Caribbean. While there are diverse recovery models, what we have learned through our experience is that the nested recovery approach works best. This is an integrated multi-level recovery strategy where recovery activities are incorporated within the broader disaster risk reduction framework, but also focusing on immediate post-disaster needs while also incorporating long-term mitigation, preparedness, and reconstruction. I also want to highlight the need for specific livelihood insurance products. And for us, creating more specific livelihood insurance products is also important. For example, in Barbados, we would have seen last year from Hurricane Beryl, a Category 4 hurricane, which decimated our fishing industry. Many of our fisher folk were uninsured, and many are still struggling to recover after their boats have been destroyed. And so promoting specific livelihood insurance products for fisher folk, persons in the agricultural, small farmers, small businesses is certainly important. And what SEDIMA is doing through the governance mechanism of the Comprehensive Disaster Management Coordination and Harmonization Council, we've created an agricultural sector subcommittee, and that sector subcommittee will also be working with those with regional organizations and with organizations such as the fisher folk and promoting their livelihood and financial social protection. And additionally, and lastly, access to recovery financing at preferred interest rates is also key. Caribbean countries, as I said, are extremely vulnerable, and a disaster impact can set a country back 10, 20 years. And therefore, even though many countries have graduated from development financing, those impacts can place severe strain on government and also cause, the diversion of resources which would be used for, other development needs. So promoting and supporting our governments in terms of looking at concessional financing for recovery, we believe is important, and the SEDIMA will continue to support that work through, the work which we do and through, evidence-based approach.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Francis. Thank you. So that was quite interesting to learn, how Barbados did all these things that you mentioned, particularly the National Recovery Framework and how reaching out to the most vulnerable through the National Recovery Framework. You mentioned one thing, diversion of resources. So what would be your take on that, how CDM-EMA is working with other ministries, and who would be the other ministries to make that happen, to make that diversion of resources? We all know that it's not very easy.
Yes. So CDEMA has been working, of course, with ministries responsible for disaster planning, but we also see as important the ministries of finance and economic planning. And based on our experience, ministries of finance, they're the ones who are heavily involved in recovery, and therefore it is important to, as I mentioned, the Model National Recovery Framework, to help these ministries to understand that integrating recovery into their planning is extremely important. And so what we're doing, we've been canvassing, yes, national disaster offices, but also ministries of economic affairs to recognize that recovery is not just a one-off thing, but they need to plan properly. And through the Model National Recovery Framework, we're hoping that these ministries will adopt this framework and set up systems to help in national recovery.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your intervention. Now I would like to turn, last but not the least, our trusted long-term partners, Asian Development Bank. So I would like to invite Mr. Evgen Zhukov, Director General for Climate Change and Sustainable Development, Asian Development Bank. So since this session started, all the speakers, they brought out different perspective of resilient recovery. So one of the things was really common in all their intervention, which is financing. And then there are challenges, there are opportunities. And so on that perspective, I would like to ask that what ADB's role would be as a multilateral bank or any other multilateral development banks they may have in making recovery finance more predictable, inclusive, and aligned with climate and DRR objectives.
Thank you, Kutsi. And it's a pleasure to join this discussion. Good afternoon to all of you. So at the Asian Development Bank, we recognize that disaster recovery provides a critical entry point to strengthen resilience to future risk through build back better principles. We provide quite a lot of recovery finance in Asia Pacific. Since 2008, we provide about $5 billion in response to 39 major disasters in 30 of our member countries. So we work with our developing member countries in advance of the disasters through investments in recovery readiness, with particular focus on the financial preparedness through prearranged financing, and post-disaster through emergency assistance loans and technical assistance to ensure that recovery is timely, people-centered, and builds long-term resilience. I'll give one specific example. This is the example of 2018 earthquake and tsunami in the province of Sulawesi in Indonesia. Immediately after that disaster, ADB provided $500 million budget support package to the country, among other things focusing on providing temporary housing, temporary schooling facilities, and temporary livelihoods. And then we followed up this program with a $300 million project loan to support recovery of the critical infrastructure in the province based on the principles Build Back Better, including reconstruction of 3 port facilities and 1 major airport. And I'm happy to say that this airport, which is very important for Sulawesi, was finally opened in March of last year. So as a multilateral development bank, in addition to providing post-recovery finance, our broader role centers on creating enabling environments through policy support, planning, and financial innovation to help countries shift from reactive disaster responses to more proactive risk management. So over the last decade, we have seen quite significant progress in this area in our countries, and also in terms of what multilateral banks can offer. Let me illustrate it with 4 specific examples. First, we work to incentivize preparedness through disaster risk financing. ADB's main instrument here is what we call contingent disaster financing, or CDF. So this provides countries with a quick disbursing budget support right after, immediately after disasters, but access to this finance is pre-negotiated based on the policy reform actions, which themselves focus on disaster management, and this in turn incentivize investments in preparedness for disasters. So in our experience, this has ensured that disaster risk financing supports systemic resilience. Since ADB introduced this facility in 2016, we already provided 5 CDFs to Pacific and also to Pakistan, Philippines, and Indonesia. Second, it's important to provide grant support to disaster risk management for our least developed member countries, which we do for our Asian Development Fund facility. So again, the focus here is to shift towards an action on preparedness and risk reduction. So under the current Asian Development Fund arrangements, we have 2 windows. One is so-called thematic window, it's about $400 million and focuses on disaster risk reduction and climate adaptation. And the second window is the crisis response window, about $300 million, which helps the countries to deal with the consequences of disasters. Third, it's important to mainstream disaster risk reduction in national investment planning. I'll give an example of Pakistan here. Last year, we approved the program in Pakistan, which is focusing on enhancing country resilience through institutional strengthening, increased public investment, and disaster risk reduction. This initiative ensures that disaster risk reduction becomes part of the regular government planning and budgeting. It supports sustained investment in this area rather than just one-off interventions. This also builds on our earlier support for Pakistan's National Disaster Risk Management Fund. This fund allocates funding across various projects, improving the disaster preparedness. And since 2017, when the fund was established, dozens of activities have been funded. My 4th and last example here is about the need to innovate to mobilize capital for resilience. And I'll give 2 examples here. One, in Central Asia region, we are working on what we call disaster relief bonds, which provide immediate post-disaster liquidity and incentivize investment in disaster risk reduction. Such bonds are currently being arranged for Tajikistan and Kyrgyz Republic. And also, we are starting to introduce what we call disaster resilient debt clauses. This is being piloted in the Pacific and also in the Kingdom of Bhutan. And the purpose is to free up liquidity following the disasters. This is a prearranged agreement which improve financial preparedness and reduce response time by the governments by deferring loan repayment in the aftermath, temporary delay in repayments to MDBs and other institutions after the major disaster. So these approaches demonstrate how MDBs such as ADB and others can support developing countries in recovery readiness by managing risks and redirecting the investments and unlocking additional finance for disaster risk reduction. Let me stop here.
Thank you very much. That's quite interesting to hear your perspective. I would say very useful. You mentioned something. You said financial preparedness. I think that's a buzzword because without the preparedness, like the financial preparedness, how this is going to happen when it comes to response or recovery. So I would like to hear from you that how do you see your or any other multilateral development bank's role in making recovery finance more predictable? Like you said, to make that financial preparedness for the countries. I would also tag another thing here. In light of these 10 action points from World Resilient Recovery Conference, how do you see your ADB's or other multilateral banks' role in this process?
I think we are fully supporting these 10 points, and especially today we're discussing point number 4, building big better especially. So ADB, like other multilateral banks, is stepping up its interventions in this area. Our new ADB president, President Kanda, who joined us in February of this year, also places a lot of emphasis on this area. We improving our own organizational capacity in this area. We are now setting up, set up a separate division dealing with disaster risk management, and we're about to get new director for this area appointed actually next week. MDBs, ADB as well, we operate on demand basis, right? We're responsive in our nature when we work with the member countries. So we are guided by the priorities that the countries themselves sees. So we have a range of instruments and approaches we can apply to DRM, including technical assistance, large grant, or emergency assistance, or other means. But for this to make sense and to happen, it's very important that the countries themselves need to clearly articulate what they need. It is critical that disaster risk management is embedded in national development plans, sector development plans, and also national policies or action plans set out how the country to move forward. So we are ready to work with our member countries in this area. And one specific example is a recently approved technical assistance package funded by Japan, specifically by Japan Fund for Prosperous and Resilience Asia and Pacific. Under that program, we work with Bangladesh, Kyrgyz Republic, Mongolia, and Timor-Leste to undertake needs assessment, which inform recovery planning, work to strengthen capacity to manage the fiscal response to disaster management through emergency public financial management, and to support culture of after-action reviews to make sure that the next recovery is even more sustainable.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Zhukov, for this intervention. It's very reassuring to hear from you some clear guidance on how the multilateral development banks can help the countries in implementation of these 10 action points. So distinguished audience, we have come to the end of our session almost. So before, you have heard a lot from 5 speakers. While it is from there, like a lot of country level good examples, at the same time, there are also a lot of information and a lot of good practices and good experience around partnership. And you can see that that's how the panel is also set up. So, and I'm sure that you want to know more. So we are here for a couple of more days. So feel free to reach out to our speakers to ask the questions and to get to know more. However, in the session, the question that cannot wait till next 72 hours, I would really like to invite you to ask those questions here to the speakers. I will take only a few in the interest of time. So the question that cannot wait, very burning question to the speakers. And once you ask the question, please introduce yourself. And also, if you have a specific question to a specific speaker, please refer to the speaker's name. Thank you. Any questions? Yes, please. The microphone is just next to you, sir.
The question is to the gentleman. I think we spoke last. My name is Norman Chipakpaku from Zambia. I'm the national coordinator at the Disaster Management and Mitigation Unit. The question of funding, you've talked about very innovative things like the bonds. How many countries have tried that? And can we hear more about these bonds? Because the insurance part for us in Africa, in Zambia, we're working with the Africa Risk Capacity, and I think they helped us so much last year. But how can we use these bonds to try and finance some of the gaps which we have? Thank you.
Thank you for this question. Actually, this is the first time ever that ADB is introducing these bonds, and we have not yet gone through financial closure, but we're doing it in 2 countries in Central Asia, as I mentioned, in Kyrgyz Republic and Tajikistan, on a relatively modest scale. It's a kind of a pilot project. So, but once we go from one cycle and see how it works, of course, we'd be happy to share with all participants in the IRP on how useful this exercise has been. So I'm happy to share our contacts, and the information on this project also will be available on ADB's external website. Thank you.
Thank you very much for both yes, please, over to you. We will take just one more question after
Sorry for sticking to the same subject as Zambia. So one is bonds and one is catastrophe bonds, where the funding basically comes from high risk, high net worth investors, and it goes into the financial markets, it opens the domain. It's one of the best futuristic instruments. ADB, India has been talking to ADB and the World Bank. But the private sector, especially in the United States, at least 85% of those bonds are raised in the United States. So why has the catastrophe bond concept, where the entire insurance risk is taken by financial investors, which is a much larger pool than just reinsurers, why has that not taken off? Question to ADB.
Thank you, sir. I'm afraid I'm not an insurance expert per se, so I won't be able to give you any intelligent answer to this. But yes, we are also puzzled by the situation. But from our side, we're trying to innovate and introduce these cat bonds or the disaster relief bonds, and also work similar to Caribbean colleagues on pooling risks in some of our regions, for example, in Central Asia and Pacific Islands region, to come up with innovative financial solutions for this. But I'm happy to work with you and your colleagues to try to figure this difficult issue.
Thank you very much. I don't see any other hands up, but that doesn't mean that you don't have a question, I'm sure. But again, as I said, feel free to reach out to the speakers. They will be here, so you can ask the questions. So I would like to now wrap up, because I also would like to give my speakers just a little time to give you something to take back. So if I conclude today, like the discussion we have had, 3 things came out very clearly. However, the purpose is not to simply evaluate, but to enable action as well of this session. To leave here with clear paths towards strengthening recovery readiness, so that when the next disaster strikes, we don't simply rebuild, but build back better, faster, and fairer. So the 3 things that came out very distinctly today, that there is a need for institutionalization of recovery readiness through governance and partnership. And we know that, and then it's like quite evident in all the country-level examples and as well the strategy. Then the second thing that was quite apparent was making recovery financing predictable, inclusive, and scalable. So this is something, by developing pre-arranged recovery financing instruments, and that our speaker from ADB just mentioned. And on the other hand, there are arrangements like contingency funds, risk pool fund, resilience bonds, everything. And then these are very good example also coming out from different country example. And last but not the least is the financing, whether it is reaching out to the most vulnerables. That is also a big issue and big concern as well. So these are some of the examples we have heard from the speakers from different countries, that how this can happen. I think that could be a very good example for many other countries. Last but not the least, again, strengthening data, local capacity, and knowledge for recovery action. This has become every day very critical. So there were quite a few, I would say, suggestions and experience that we heard, that investing in recovery data system, that is very critical, building local level recovery delivery capacity. Then this local level delivery capacity building includes housing, livelihoods, and health system as well. And so that everything around the community and the social protection. And then usefulness of the case studies, learning from lessons. You heard from Mozambique, from Bangladesh, their cyclone response. So learning from what happened before and then strategizing the future action on that. So today's discussion has made one point very clear though. Recovery readiness is not a distant aspiration, but a very urgent necessity. 3 actionable steps stand out that I just shared with you. However, I think that one of the main target would be how we can make our communities empowered to drive resilient recovery with the appropriate and optimal support from the risk-informed governance at every level. So in that case, only we move closer to making recovery not only faster, but fairer and equitable as well. So 5 years away from Sendai Framework conclusion, we should carry this insight forwards that would make our actions more doable. So with this, again, as I said, I am keeping my promise, turning around to my speakers, just to take 30 seconds. In 30 seconds, what message you would like to give us to take home? Yes, there are a lot of information you have provided. So this time I will go on the other direction, though. It's first you.
Thank you. So I'll be very brief. So, of course, ultimately, we all aim to scale up investment in disaster risk reduction and recovery, and also preparedness. So our financing, we think, need to reflect the real challenges that our member countries face. So that means making this finance faster, more flexible, and inclusive, and more forward-looking. And I'd like also to use the opportunity to recognize the importance of IRP and the readiness of ADB to work closely with this platform to advance this very important agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Zhukov. And do I hear more commitment from ADB to our countries, right? Okay. So now I would like to turn to Mr. Jason Francis. Your 30 seconds, sir.
Sure, thank you. So the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency remains committed to promoting recovery in the resilient recovery in the region. We're open to partnership, we're open to financing, and even though the region, the Caribbean region, is small in comparison to other regions, there are a lot of best practices that have come out from the work that SEDIMA has been doing in the region, and those certainly are transferable to other regions, especially in the area of recovery. So, we're open to partnership and we're grateful to be here.
Thank you very much. Thank you. That's quite inspiring. And now, Mr. Nishikawa Satoru.
Yes, thank you. Well, JICA is committed to assist disaster-stricken countries to build back better. Thank you.
That's really 30 seconds, even less, I think. But thank you very much for that. So, Mr. Gabriel Bela Monteiro, over to you, sir.
Yes. Uma vez que as mudanças climáticas são uma realidade frequente, era importante que os países continuassem bastante ligados e também a parte financeira fosse flexível para dar resposta o mais rápido, flexível que for.
Good. We emphasize on the flexible mechanism of financing, and also we need to be more prepared and connected with the local and international partnership. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Last but not the least, my first speaker from Bangladesh.
Thank you. What I am taking away from here is that I have a feeling that Bangladesh is on the right track of recovery readiness. Actually, we are doing what we have to do from the beginning of our country, from the inception. But I am really excited to see are we in the right track of recovery readiness on the framework. So I will carry on this message. I will try to practice in my country. And to do this, we really need to invest more on recovery readiness. I'm hopeful that ADB is here. With also World Bank, we have shock responsive programs, but not recovery financing. So I will take on this message to my country, and I'll try to be more involved with ADB and World Bank and like other organizations for financing on recovery readiness. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, dear audience, if I would request you to give a huge round of applause for my 5 speakers, please. Thank you very much. We are concluding this session, but as you see that this session was on landscape on resilient recovery. That means this session has set the stage for the discussion for next 2 days. So I think that a lot of messages are here, a lot of take-home information, and then a lot of wisdom, I would say, and insights. So I think that it will be a very good idea, and then I believe all of us together, this is what we learned, that recovery is not one person's or one country's own, one community's, one partner's job. It's a cumulative effort. So that's the message I personally take back. It's a reassurance that will be very helpful in my work, that everything that we do for resilient recovery is doing it together. Thank you all very much, and then looking forward to see you next 2 days. Thank you.